Well, Daniel, thank you for putting all this together today. Talking about healthcare IT roadmap planning. Um, hope this is chock full of great information. My goal is to go fairly quickly so we can get value out of our time together. And obviously, at the end of this, we'll provide links to get back in touch with us if you have further questions, etc. Um, thanks again for being here today. And without further ado, we will start talking about IT roadmap and planning. So I think one of the first things is to really differentiate between planning and budgeting, right? Planning is where we're mapping our business needs, the needs of our practice into hopefully actionable steps and what we would call an IT roadmap that'll kind of support your plan, right? And budgeting is allocating money. And unfortunately, budgeting often with IT is allocation of money to maintenance, projects, and support. Candidly, things that are not moving your practice forward. They're not increasing the productivity of our providers and stuff like that. They're just kind of keeping a steady state. Often, when we have an internal IT group, the budget, they just, they want 5% more than last year, and they want a couple of little tools and extra things, which isn't wrong, but it also is not planning. So again, planning is the act of understanding, hey, where do we want to go? Do we want to open 3 locations next year? Do we want to do this? Do we want to increase provider efficiency by having tap to log in our exam rooms and stuff like that? And so if we're planning, that's a very different framework than if we're just allocating money. What happens when you don't plan and you just budget is over time, you are going to accrue technical debt, right? And so when we talk about technical debt, what that is over time, more and more of our dollars. So if you look at the slide here, most groups are spending 80 to 90% of their technology budget, the dollars available for technology, on just maintenance, right? So they're not adding new capabilities, they're not increasing efficiencies, they're probably not keeping up in many cases with security needs of healthcare organizations. And so this leads to a very reactive, IT environment, right? And so at some point, our technical debt, meaning the fact we haven't proactively replaced our equipment, we haven't invested in modern Microsoft 365 licensing, we haven't done all these things. And the cost to support, let's call it the old way, is that interest on the debt. So it just continues to eat up more and more of your budget, and you get in a pretty not great place, because the cycle now is, well, in order to move forward, we got to pay off that debt. And unfortunately, a lot of practices, they can't write, they don't have the cash flow or the funds available to pay off the interest the debt all at once. And so they're in a very interesting spot. And we have through planning, what we've got to do is acknowledge our technical debt, understand and very clearly identify the things that are holding us back and that we want to fix. And then we'll talk later in this about kind of prioritizing those needs so we have a plan over time to get this technical debt paid off. A really helpful tool in stepping back, right? So okay, we've got technical debt. How do I get started planning? This is great, strategy, planning, all these kinds of things. We found there's a number of tools, but the business model canvas is actually something that Daniel here, he one day we were in a meeting and he said, I've used this in the past, and I think this could be helpful. And we were all like, we're IT people. What are you talking about? We're not going to do a SWOT analysis. And he's like, but we are, right? And he brought this up, and it is something actually in business school that I've used a couple of different times. And it can be very helpful to take a step back and just revisit your overall business plan and strategy. So a lot of executive teams have planning sessions, but they become very tactical, at least in the outcomes a lot of times. So I'm not saying you need a 5-day offsite with your board, but what I am saying is you can download this template. We'll put a link to it, and just go and fill it out based on kind of where you are and where you want to go. And by the process of going through this, it'll really help you think about, well, if we're going to do this, it would make sense that, if we're going to open this clinic and these providers are going to travel to it, we're going to have to figure out a much better way for them to access the EHR, right? Because today it's here. Or if we're going to start running a clinic in these hospitals and our people are going to need access to our HR inside the hospital. Well, we've got a plan for that from a technology perspective. So again, very helpful to use a tool like the Business Model Canvas to stop and understand, hey, where do I want to go in the next 12 to 18 months? And then oftentimes that will expose needs that then we can drill down into actually thinking about technology planning and road mapping. So, we've got this group of needs, right? I hate to tell you this, everybody thinks their needs are unique and what they're trying to do is unique. It's not. 80% of the groups we work with have the same problems, issues, set of needs when we start with them. There's a 20% delta, but the reality is 80% of all groups have kind of the same setup, the same needs to get handled over time. First of all, we recommend, obviously we recommend a partner that is experienced and can help you plan these things. And also it's kind of a cheat code because again, 80% of the needs we're already aware of. So we can really skip to the end and really tweak the plan versus create it. That said, if you're not using a partner, not working with a partner, a couple of things to think about. So you got this list of needs, and we've all seen the graphic here, important, urgent, not important, those types of things. I would have you strongly consider classifying them that way. That's pretty easy to do. So the fact that you don't have what we call two-factor authentication, you're still using a username and password with no token, and everybody can log in and you're sharing passwords. Well, that to me is a very important and urgent issue to get solved. Our revenue cycle management, it's in-house. It's very difficult for us to submit to 100 different payer portals and all the different things. And that is important, but maybe not urgent, right? And so we could think about, maybe we want to implement Microsoft Copilot or some AI-based tools to help process those claims internally, which is actually really cool stuff. But anyway, so that's important, but not urgent. So we got to classify all these things. Obviously, if it's not urgent or important, let's let that kind of fall away and maybe not make it to the roadmap. So that's one little framework. The other one, IT in our world should have a return on investment calculation. It shouldn't just be a cost. We should have, not everything, right? So workstations, well, you're going to buy a piece of hardware and it'll get depreciated and has a cost, but the return is that, your practice functions. But I'm specifically talking about on roadmap items. So if we go and spend, $15,000, $20,000 to properly implement Microsoft Teams, and I do not mean for video calls like what we're doing today. I mean much different, but we're going to properly implement Teams to enable our people to share information and be more. Well, that 20,000 is the cost of investment, and then what's the return on that? Well, right. So if I got 30 minutes per back office employee a week back, Daniel, what's that? Typically that's what, hours, and so all of a sudden hours. And you put your burden labor rate on that, well, there's your return on investment. And I promise you, it'll be very high and very positive. So don't skip the step where IT is literally a cost. Like pieces of it can be a cost, but we need to think about return on investment and prioritize our needs. Okay, great. So we've talked about technical debt. We've stepped back, done some planning. We've got a bucket of needs, right? Well, what do we do with this bucket of needs, right? So, well, let's put them in some categories, folks. I think that'll be fun. So now we have this list of needs, and hopefully they're somewhat stack ranked. And so now let's translate that into some actionable IT roadmap items, right? At Stringfellow, we've got kind of three categories we look at. It's core, security, and then productivity. Those are also on the basis of, core has candidly the least ROI, security would be kind of the next, and then really productivity is where you want to get to as an organization. So a classic sign that you are in maintenance mode and that you probably need a partner to help you get out of that is that basically everything is core. Like literally your whole budget's consumed with equipment refresh, maybe putting in some new wireless access points, what we consider, very basic, IT stuff. That's why we call it core. It's necessary. You have to do it and plan for it. But if it's not done correctly, all of a sudden the core eats up everything. We barely have any budget left for security, which we pick and choose. And really, we should be doing all of that. And we never get to productivity. So I would also suggest to you, if you're not getting to that return on investment and where you're excited about a project. I mean, we want you to be excited when we're like, man, we're going to put in some technology that's going to change how you work for the better, right? And this is where Daniel gets really excited. He's been a VCIO for us in the past and has seen that happen. We'll have an example of that later in the talk. But anyway, 3 buckets is what we find is helpful. Classify, core, security, productivity, and again, if you got to, it helps you also frame in like, hey, I really need to get at least this productivity project in, and it helps you kind of horse trade between those things. So those are the categories that we use. Okay, great. So I've got the categories, I've got the stuff. How do I pay for this? Like what should I be spending, right? So it's pretty well documented at this point. The average spend of healthcare practices is approximately 4.3% of revenue. This Deloitte slide's a little old, but I went and found some new data, and it essentially hasn't really changed. So we're talking about 4.3% of revenue. Of that, we find that budgeting 2% of revenue to this IT roadmap that we're talking about today, this core, security, and productivity, that is that'll provide sufficient funds to keep all the categories where they need to be and to stop accruing technical debt. Sure, you can always spend more, but we like to be realistic. And so what we're seeing is about 2 to 2.2% of revenue. If you spend that on these roadmap items that we're talking about today, you'll be in very, very good shape, and you will start to dig out of the hole of technical debt if that's where you are. The remaining 2.3 or so percent, that gets allocated to your EHR, your practice management, or other clinical software that you're using, right? So you're going to end back up at 4, but Stringfellow's looking at how do we optimize that 2% spend, because if that's kind of the basis for how these, how your practice operates. So if your network's not up to snuff and your workstations are failing all the time, your cloud-based EHR is not going to matter, right? So we want to get the max ROI and really plan for that first 2%, and then the remainder helps out. Another metric that has come up is $32,500 per provider. We work with a lot of groups that are doing various so multi-specialty clinics and a lot of different service lines. So that 32.5 can be a little harder to gauge, but in your specific practice, if you're maybe family medicine and a provider's very easy to quantify, that can also be a guide. But candidly, we find that 2% and then 4.3% is spot on, and it's easy to understand and plan and budget for. So great, we've talked about what we want to do, how we want to do it, categorized it, and now we've come up with a budget, right? And so this is super simple, and that's fine. Simple is better to start. Again, having a partner to help guide you through this, that'll have insights on the roadmap items is very, very helpful. But anyway, simple is better. So we're going to look at, practice revenue. Let's say we got 12 million and 2.5%. So what's possible with that? So your estimated IT budget or spend should be about 245,000, right? I think this example was based on about maybe 30 providers and another 50 admin and back office staff. So that's it. I think it was based on maybe 5 locations. So anyway, $12 million practice with that setup. If we're looking at a roadmap, the output there would be about $130,000 in an IT partnership with a group like Stringfellow, and that helps provide your service desk, this type of planning, obviously security, all those things that we saw on the roadmap are included, right? And so that's that piece. Don't skip over planning to refresh your hardware. Don't run it till it breaks, because it breaks at the worst times. So let's not do that. Let's at least plan to spend the money. Maybe we don't spend it, but let's at least accrue for it. So we budget for workstations. Again, in this example, is about 120 users or computers. And so we like to do a 4-year life cycle. So let's plan for 30 machines a year. That's 54,000, and that would be a capital expense. Roadmap. So all these projects. And typically we want projects to be, if we can, we want to be in that productivity space where we're getting a high return on investment. So, You may not be, if you got a lot of technical debt, you're gonna have to go back to core and security and probably clean some of that up, but we'll get you to productivity. Roadmap projects, what we look at there, we've got some internal metrics that help us come up with what this number needs to be. And what we see is if you take your IT outsourcing budget, if you budget about 20 to 30% of that number for projects, you're taken care of. And in fact, at Stringfellow, we've taken that to another level where we have a way where we take even the project cost out and wrap it into a true fixed fee, including all your roadmap projects, which has been really great for a lot of clients because now it's just, for them, it's autopilot, right? We know what needs to happen. They help prioritize maybe this over this, but the reality is the budget is very easy, and it turns their entire IT kind of budget into an OpEx expense, which is more easy to understand and line up with revenue. Anyway, regardless, you got a budget for your projects. And then the last piece is what we would call, they're kind of hosted services, your Microsoft 365 licensing, backup services that you might have, and those kinds of things. And so then there's that fee. And so in this case, this is exactly what it would look like. It's funded perfectly. In this example, they will have a very well-run IT infrastructure. Their end users will get great support. They'll be secure. They'll be on the latest Microsoft, platforms as far as security and making sure that email is safe and those types of things. This includes the opportunity for them to go onto Microsoft Teams and do all those kinds of things. So anyway, that's what this would look like. Obviously, we would base, this changes based on the size of your practice. Daniel, has this been helpful so far?
Yeah, I think it's good to break it down. We got to get to the numbers, right? Of course,
yeah,
otherwise we're just kind of talking about kind of random concepts if we don't put numbers with it. Numbers don't lie.
And I think another big challenge is that we don't talk about random numbers. We're reactive, and we go, oh my God, we had a breach, so now let's go dump a ton of money into security and do all this, which isn't necessarily wrong, but the reality is now we spent all this money in security, but we still have productivity we hadn't touched and potentially core. So it's a process. It's just a process that you have to go through.
Yeah.
So I think it's helpful to have some kind of real world example. So we'll end with that today. So a group came to us and said, hey, we're thinking about making some changes about how we're planning and budgeting for technology. We said, great, we'd be happy to have a chat with you. And so it turns out that, they had, I believe 2 in-house resources that were there. They had a custom in-house kind of EHR. This was a home health group, by the way. So they had a ton of people out in the field going into homes, on various devices, trying to connect back. And so anyway, we took a step back. I think Daniel did use the business model canvas. You did.
Yes.
So we took a step back and we kind of looked and did kind of an exercise with them. We said, well, and started just questioning. So if you've always done it this way, again, that will 100% lead to IT maintenance type mentality. And then unfortunately, internal IT gets stuck with that a little bit because nobody's asking them to help business model canvas, right? They're just saying, hey, how do you spend less and do more? And candidly, that is not the right approach to IT, road mapping or planning. But what happened here? Well, here's what happened. We identified that through an IT relationship with Stringfellow that, the in-house resource who during the process went and found what I would consider a more suitable job that they were excited about. So the in-house resource is going away. They said, oh, what are we going to do? We're going to rehire. I said, no, we can take that piece on. And so that was very cost effective overall. And candidly, when you have multiple offices or people that are remote, you really do need a partner because just the 1 or 2 individuals, that doesn't scale very well. So we increased productivity, and I think it was on a cost neutral basis. Their ERP, we looked and we said, why are we doing this? There's if you use Microsoft 365 correctly, you're already paying for all of the solutions you'll need on this security piece that now they were paying, I believe it was what, Daniel, $10,000 a month.
They're paying $10,000 a month for the license for all the seats for the software they had for their MDM, and then they're paying another $5,000 in Azure spend to host all the servers up in the cloud. So it's about $15,000. And it was something that came with what we offered already.
So it literally was the fact. in their instance, they just weren't taking advantage of the Microsoft licensing, the features that had come with it already. So, long story short, I'm pretty sure the 15 grand covered our partnership alone, right? Which is fine. I mean, we want a win-win every time. So we were able to come in. Yes, there were some upfront project dollars to get these things in place, but I mean, I think the return was less than 6 months. So in less than 6 months, they're more productive. Now, I think they expanded into Florida and some other places. Now they can turn on a user with no problem, turn off a user, all these great things. So they're much more efficient and secure. And for less dollars, and we're happy to have them as a partner and client. So I hope this has been helpful. We'll put some links to get in touch with us at the end of the show notes, etc. Daniel, thank you for having me on today. It's always fun to talk about roadmapping and planning. Please reach out to us at Stringfellow anytime. We love these conversations. We want to help people move forward, especially with their technology strategy and planning. So reach out and get in touch with us anytime, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.